You are listening to your auntie's favorite DJ, DJ Tricey Trice.
What the pod? What the pod? What the pod? What the pod?
Welcome back to What the Pod. My name is DJ Tricey Trice, and you are listening to episode 4. Count it 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you for tuning in again. For those who are new to What the Pod is a podcast where I ask random people that I've met on the internet to come onto my podcast to talk about their podcast. So we're really deep in the podcast matrix right now, but I promise you'll come out of it with a whole playlist of dope podcasts to listen and subscribe to. And today, continuing in the trend of International Women's History Month, I have on today Miss Marianne. Everybody, welcome Marianne to the show.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Thank you for coming on. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what your podcast is.
Okay, my name's Marianne and I'm from New Zealand. My podcast is about all things paranormal, unexplained, things that go bump in the night, mysteries like spontaneous human combustion, paranormal, ghosts, hauntings, poltergeist, incubus and succubi, UFOs and experiences, and cryptozoology, of course, so monsters, myths, the fae, all that sort of thing. Anything that belongs in the shadows.
Oh my gosh. You just gave me so many things. I was like furiously writing things down. Like I have to ask about all of these things because I'm so interested in all of them. So really quick for the people listening in their cars or whatever, what's the name of your podcast?
Walking the Shadowlands.
Awesome. So go ahead. Remember that for those who are just listening to the audio version. But for those watching at home, it's going to be down in the description. So Marianne, tell us, how did you get into anything paranormal? How did this all start?
Well, it's kind of a long story. And I don't usually put my face out there. So this is a bit different for me, being on a live video. I've been my entire life, I'm a spiritual sensitive, I'm a clairvoyant medium, clairsentient. And I've had experiences my entire life. I'm 65 shortly. So it's been a lifelong thing. Started when I was very young. I've had experiences with star people and UFOs my entire life, which kind of my time with my star people just sort of enhanced my clairvoyant abilities, sort of brought them to the fore. So it's been, for me, walking in the Shadowlands has been part of my life, my entire life. So for me, it's just as much a part of my everyday life as breathing is, really. It's nothing out of the ordinary for me. So I started a Facebook group by the same name as the podcast, Walking the Shadowlands. And my members kept saying to me, Marianne, you should start a podcast. You should start a podcast. You know, we would listen to what you have to say. And I thought, oh, gosh, I'm not that interesting. You know, what would I get anybody who would be even interested in listening to what I have to say? But I did. And I really love my podcast. I love doing it. And, you know, you never run out of topics to talk about.
Yes. And okay, so I'm a major fan of everything that you're talking about. I personally am a person that thinks that who knows what's out there. I'm constantly questioning everything, and everything that you're saying to me is something that I watch on documentaries like tirelessly, like UFOs and all that. So when you say star people, can you tell us a little bit more about what that is? Because I'd like to hear more.
Okay, star people is the term I give to extraterrestrials. Because as a child, they were people from the stars. And so they just became star people, and that's what they've been for me my entire life. Do you want to hear experiences?
Yeah. Just give us a little bit if you will.
Okay, my first recollection of seeing star people was when I was about 3. My father used to be a sharemilker, which in New Zealand is kind of like a farmer, a dairy farmer, kind of like. And we lived way out in the country. Now, in New Zealand, in the country, in those days, back in the 50s, there was not a lot of traffic. There were metal roads or dirt roads. There was not a lot of street lights and not many cars. So we had been out somewhere one night and we were coming home, and there was myself, my sister, my half sister, my mum and dad in the car. And my other two sisters, my half sister, my other sister, were older than me, and I was the youngest. And there was this light behind the car, and because it was low to the ground and it was very bright, and my parents just thought it was another car following us, so we didn't pay too much although it's unusual, it wasn't unheard of, so we didn't pay too much attention to it. And then we got to the point in the road where we had to turn off and go down a track to go to the farm. Now the gate was shut. We always keep the gate shut so the cattle can't get out, which is a normal thing you do on farms. And as we turned off to go down the road, the light that was behind us shot up. Oh, vertically? Is that vertically?
In the air?
I was getting, yeah. So it shot right up and was gone. And that's when my parents realised that, that wasn't a car, that was something else. Anyway, we got to the gate. And as we got to the gate, all of a sudden, the car stopped so somebody could get out and open it. All of a sudden, this light came down over the top of the car, like you see in the movies. It was a bright white light, though, and my parents were freaking out. My sisters were crying. My mum and dad were arguing. Dad, go and open the gate. Leo, I'm not getting out of this car. You go and open the gate, because they were terrified. And anyway, I was excited because I knew who they were. I could feel them. They were my star people. And in the bright light, you could see these forms outside of the car. You could see a humanoid shape. And they were walking around the car, coming to the windows, right around the car. And that's the last thing I remember of that experience.
Oh my God. I am on the edge of my seat right now.
It was cool.
Oh my goodness. And we constantly think we see things in the air, and I'm like, there's no way. I mean, maybe that's a drone or whatever, but whoa, what an experience. And this was, you were growing up in New Zealand, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're out on a farm in India. This sounds like New Zealand sounds like Indiana pretty much in the United States.
Yeah.
Like, this farmland.
Country.
Yeah. So I've grown up in a similar kind of thing. Wow, thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. And it's like I felt like I was inside of a documentary. So definitely, folks, if you like that little taste of it, go visit her podcast. Okay, so tell us a little bit more. You're talking about monsters. Like, what's a monster that most people don't think is real, but is actually real?
Well, Bigfoot.
Bigfoot's I kind of think that too. Like a big animal, those could be. Is it a man though? Tell me about Bigfoot.
Oh, look, he's all over the world. I've done a number of episodes on him, actually. I've done one with a chap that in the States called Hunting Bigfoot, and he goes out looking for Bigfoot deliberately. But he's known by different names throughout the world. Like, for example, in New Zealand, he has a number of names. He goes by the Moiho Man, and he has a couple of other names. In Australia, he's called the Yowie. In other countries, I can't remember offhand other countries' names, but every country has a version of the Bigfoot creature. They just go by different names.
Yeah, like mermaids, for example. I think mermaids are real. People don't think that, but I'm like, dude, people back in cave days were drawing what they saw, and they all have cave drawings of half people, half fish, so it has to be real, right?
Oh, that's interesting. That brings up an interesting point. There is a group of star people who are half human, half fish. Yes, but if you look up the Dogon tribe in South Africa, I think it's Dogon, they had contact with these beings.
Really?
Mhm.
So you're telling me that they're extraterrestrial beings. See, because my theory is
These
that
ones,
Pangea just kind of sunk, and with adaptation, there are people who are half fish, half people.
well, and it's funny that you bring up the mermaids because I was just speaking with the lady I told you about earlier about this subject,
Mm-hmm.
about mermaids. And she was saying, and I agree with her, there's so much of the ocean that hasn't been explored, that hasn't been mapped, that we know nothing about, where there could be species living like mermaids and
But what if they
mer
do
people.
know? Because they constantly give us movies like Atlantis and tell us the
Mm,
Bermuda
mm,
Triangle, like
mm.
ships just disappear. What if that's that civilization of people just taking people and living in stealth mode? Is
Oh,
is that too far
well,
fetched?
no, I don't think so. I think anything's possible.
Yeah.
Uh, who knows? And that's isn't that exciting though
I
to have these
know.
mysteries?
I know,
Yeah.
especially because I feel like these like Disney and all these different movies that come out, they're telling us some truth in them. I believe because nobody's imagination is this great that they're just making up all this stuff, and that's not how this works.
No, it's not. And actually, I did ask my star people one time. I said to them, how much truth is there in these shows like Star Trek and all these science? And he said, well, we've given people a lot of information.
That's what I'm thinking. Oh my goodness, that's just phenomenal. That can even be a possibility. Um, okay, so we talked about mermaids. What is one of the most fascinating like monster encounters or stories that you've had over the time?
Monsters. Well, my latest episode, which is called South of the Border, I have a really lovely chap on who has a show called Unexplained Mexico, and he studies all these cryptids in Mexico, all the legends. He said because there's so many in Mexico that people don't know about because they've not been translated into English.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I don't know how to pronounce it, and I'm scared I'll butcher it. Um, they have a version of fairy folk, and there's actually they were building a bridge to one of the major airports in Mexico, and the bridge kept collapsing. And finally, some local people said it's because of these beings, and I can't think of the name offhand, these fairy beings. You didn't ask permission to be able to build on the land. You need to give them offerings and ask permission. So they did that. They gave them offerings, they asked permission, and actually, under the bridge, they built a little house for them. And after they did that, they never had any more issues with building the bridge.
What?
Yeah, I can't think of the name of the fairy folk. Oh, yeah.
So you're saying
Gosh,
like
I'm so
fairies as
sorry.
in like little like Tinkerbell fairies?
No, more like
No.
little gnomes.
Oh, really? Okay,
Mm,
like little
mm.
trolls under a bridge kind of thing?
Sort of,
Sort of.
yeah.
That's pretty fascinating. And I mean, do you think a fair amount of this is like folklore just passed on from, year to year?
Are you asking if I think that it's just a story? No, I don't. I absolutely believe in the Fae. I know they exist. That's not an issue for me. See, the thing is, there's so many more realities. Think of this planet like an onion, and
Hmm.
the Earth being like the core of an onion. And every layer of the onion is another dimension of being, another reality. And there are so many more realities wrapped around this one than most people are aware of. And the Fae, the fairy folk, whatever name they go by, they live in one of those dimensions.
Yeah, I was just talking to someone about like time being relative, and I read this book called Frequency by Penny Pierce, and she was basically saying like how time isn't linear like our life. it's more spatial, and all these things are happening around us. We're just on a different frequency, right? So it's funny that you say the earth is like an onion, because I have this theory. We just moved recently to California, just across the country from Indiana. And I had this theory that there's this version of me back there still, if that makes sense. Because what if I never decided to do the things? I think there is a version of me that never changed her ways, never did all this. I also recently lost weight. So I'm like, every single day, the decisions that I make lead me to the person that I'm becoming, or the person that I am, because there's no becoming, right? Because the future doesn't exist. So how true do you feel about, you're shaking your head. So give me your thoughts on that.
Oh, look, you were just going into an area that I absolutely love. One of my favorite areas. And it's an episode that I did called A Glitch in the Matrix, a Holographic Reality. And I did like about 30 hours plus research for this show. It was like writing a thesis. And what you're talking about is parallel realities, parallel dimensions. And there's a lot of theories, theoretical physicists, some big names. And there's links to them on my website. Under that episode, I've got links to each of the major theoretical physicists in the world, and their thoughts on this reality being a holographic reality.
Like it's just a projection of what you create in your mind?
No.
What is? Okay, so school me on that part.
So they're thinking that that this world that we exist in doesn't actually exist. That it's a hologram created by a more intelligent species, and we're like avatars in this hologram.
I can kind of get down with that too. I've looked at a couple different things on that, and that's my reason for believing in that a little bit, is just, or being able to hear that and accept that, is because, why do we sleep? No, people never think about that. Like, why do we need to sleep? And it's almost like when you sleep, you leave this dimension and do something. It's almost like that's where it's like, is this a simulation, or are we spirits having a human experience, if that makes sense?
We are spirits having a human experience, but we're having a human experience in a holographic reality. It's really like, it's like these movies like Inception and The Matrix. The Matrix, really, the guys that wrote that did a really excellent job. The first one, I don't know about the others, I never saw the others, but the first one, you see, because like this chair that I'm sitting on, it isn't actually solid. It's a bunch of atoms vibrating
against each other,
with a huge amount of space between them. But we just perceive it as solid. But it's not. There's a quote, and I'm going to butcher the quote because I can't remember it from the Matrix movie, and it's not Neo. What's that guy that he was looking for? I can't think of his name. Morpheus. And he says, "What is reality?" Butchering this quote. All reality is electrical neurons firing in your brain that creates your perception of reality.
Yeah. I believe that. I believe it because people will all sit in the same room and have the same experience, but tell the story completely different. It's
Absolutely.
like, it'll never be my perception is never going to be your perception. It's just, it's wild. It's very bizarre, but I love the fact that is a possibility, and that's why I think manifestation works. It's because you repeat these things over and over, or you write down that, and you just made it real for the first time. You made it physical, and that's how it creates itself somehow.
That's a really good way of looking at it, actually. Yeah.
So tell me, what about the universe? I think people throw the word universe out a lot now. So what is your perception of what the higher being is? Is it the universe for you? Is it just space?
You're asking if I believe in God?
What is your version of God?
I don't believe it. I have a bit of a different understanding because I come from the knowledge that my star people have taught me. So my perception of God is quite different. The term God, think of God as like a governor or an overseer of a specific area. But they're not the higher power.
They're not. So who is the higher power?
I don't know. You could call it universal consciousness if you like.
I've read that in a bunch of books. Universal consciousness, just the presence of
Just the presence, yeah.
energy, because energy is neither created or destroyed. So talk about, what do you believe about the afterlife?
Well, yeah, this is really tricky because my knowing is quite different. There is an afterlife, absolutely. There is a spirit realm. These bodies are just like cars that we use to get from point A to point B. And when that car's rusty or worn out or breaks down and it no longer serves us, we discard it and move on. And that's what these physical bodies are. But the soul of us, who we are, lives forever. Energy never dies. It simply transforms into a different. That's the first law of physics.
Yeah, that's the first law of physics. Neither created or destroyed. And I talk about that all the time. So that's just fascinating. Okay. So which part haven't we talked about? We haven't talked about paranormal yet. So take me paranormal. Like,
what would you like to know? Where would you like to go in the
where
paranormal?
would I like to
so
go?
fast.
Okay,
It's so fast.
I'm here in LA, and this Hotel Cecil thing is like
Oh,
viral
yes.
right now. Like, so I was actually when we first moved here, we were staying with a friend like 2 buildings over from that hotel. I didn't know anything about the paranormal. I didn't know the show wasn't even being produced yet. They actually were shooting a lot of it right when I was there, which was very,
Right.
very crazy. So now there are people camped out there. They're trying to break in. They're taking pictures. They're doing all that. But for me, it was just a regular thing. I will say the rats that were in front of there, I believe, are possessed by whatever demon or spiritual, because the rats specific, like in LA, are crazy. But when you run past the building, like at night, they're going up the wall. It's like crazy. They're everywhere in front of this building, just to give everybody the other side of this, because you won't see that part on TV, but that is what's really happening there.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I've never, that's a your country thing. I've never seen rats.
Oh yeah, it's a city thing. Like
Yeah.
it's not, but they're huge. They're like squirrels here, if that makes sense. Yeah,
Oh,
there are
really?
that many of them, but they really only
Wow.
come out at night, and they're pretty big though. They could be a small dog, some of them.
No exaggeration.
It gets intense, which is why I usually don't walk at night. You know, you can hear them in the trash cans. There's a lot of garbage here because a lot of people live here. And LA has a huge like homeless population as well. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of people on the streets, constantly too. So it just attributes to
All of that.
the situation. Yeah. So, but that was the one thing that I took away from just being on that block, was that. But they're saying that the building is like possessed with different spirits. There have been serial killers who live there. There was a woman who they had a video of her on an elevator, and like she looked possessed. Yeah, and then she they found her in the water tank or something like that. Yeah. So do you do things like that? Do you use any science with it, or what's your take on like paranormal?
Well, as a medium, I can tell you that life exists after. I have a lot to do with spirit. I'm going back to that. I keep getting drawn back to that building, and my gut intuition tells me that it's not the building. It's something to do with the land it's on and how it was used.
Maybe we should look that up. I have no idea. It was a train station. A train station was on that corner. I know that for sure because my friend lives in that building.
Some areas have, most native cultures throughout the world have areas that they will avoid because they are sacred, or they are tapu, or they are areas that you must avoid at all costs. And this is generally because of the energies associated with that area, and often because there are earth elementals that live in that area.
Yeah.
And not all elementals are friendly towards humans. And my gut feeling is that there is a very, very old energy that lives on that area.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying an energy that lives on that area. Is that like a person that was there, or you're saying it's just mostly like an energy force from the earth?
I suspect an elemental.
Yeah, elemental. Yeah, I was reading
Yeah,
a little bit about different
yeah,
like energy hubs in the world, and
yeah,
a bunch of places where mysterious things happen, and there are certain elements that are like in just higher presence there.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so what's the most interesting show you've ever had? Like
Oh,
wild your mind and everything for you.
oh, wow, there's been so many of them. Oh,
I can
my,
tell you love it all.
I do, I love it. My favorite shows are the one I just mentioned, the A Glitch in the Matrix, the holographic realities. I really love doing that. That was in my first season, and that's consistently been in my top 10 episodes since it was aired. I had a guest last season a guy who wrote a book called Escaping from Eden. And this chap was really interesting. I was a bit hesitant about interviewing him because he was a pastor and he'd been a pastor for 4 years. And I'm not, I'm not about religious discussion. That's not what my podcast is about. And so I was a bit hesitant about interviewing him, but I read his book and it was amazing. Now, this chap was a pastor for 40 years. He taught pastors. He studied ancient theology, not just religious texts, not just Christian religious texts, but old religious texts all over the world, with some African tribes in Egypt, all over the world. And he went all over the world and he studied these. And then he had an accident and he was stuck at home. And he thought, well, let me go back and restudy the Genesis scriptures, because there's something there that just doesn't sit right for me. And so he went over the Genesis scriptures, and through his study of the scriptures and other ancient writings from different cultures throughout the world, he came to the conclusion of what I had known my entire life, that humanity was created by a race of extraterrestrial beings, and it's recorded in Genesis.
So that's on your episode. You said season
6 is called Escaping from Eden.
Escaping from Eden. Wow,
it's one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, I'm gonna write that down. I definitely want to hear that
Oh,
one.
he's such an interesting chap. And he talks about, I think it's a Zulu legend, about how the earth was created and how the gods came from the skies.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really, really cool.
I studied world religion. So I went to Catholic school well, we're not really Catholic. It's a private school, but we had to take religious studies all of the years, and we took world religions, and they taught us all of these different religions, and it was so just peculiar how they all had these same archetype stories, but just different names, So
exactly.
That's when I started to be like, okay, I just want to meet people of different cultures just to hear what they have to say, because they probably have the same kinds of stories, or the same identical story, So that's awesome.
That was probably one of my favorite episodes, and I was so hesitant about interviewing him because I thought it was going to be all religious and preachy, and it just wasn't. And it really taught me a lot about myself and my own biases.
Yeah.
It really, and I find that doing podcasts does that. I tend to have more guests than do solo episodes these days, and I just learn so much. I'm like a sponge. I can't get enough,
Yeah, and especially when you're interested in it. It's just
yeah.
This is
and the third one. Sorry, the third one is I can't. My mind's just gone blank. I can't think of the name. It was before Escaping from Eden, the episode before that, and it was this chap who had a near-death experience. Oh, it was the most. I cried when I was interviewed. I was trying to be professional, but my head. Fortunately, it wasn't video. Had tears bawling down my eyes while he was telling me his story. He was in his 20s, I think, and he had gone to say goodbye to a friend at a train station in England, and it was winter, and he had a thick winter coat on. And as he left the train, the doors shut and his coat got caught in the train on the station. And he thought, no worries, they just flip open again and I'll just... But it didn't. The door stuck in his train and the train took off with him still attached. Yeah. And he was dragged under the train, and everybody on the train saw this happen. And he was dragged under the train, and the train went over him and stopped a few hundred yards down the track. And he survived. He was rushed to hospital with major injuries to his arm, and he died at the hospital, and he had this near-death experience. And oh gosh, it was just so touching. And when he came back, he had to learn to, he had injuries he had to deal with, and he had a lot of rehab. But he came back being able to paint, and he'd never been able to paint before. And he also composes symphonies, and he never did anything like that. And his artwork is beautiful, and his music is just lovely. And he met these beings who healed him while he was there, and he saw himself out in the universe being healed.
Oh my!
It was the most amazing story, and those would be my top 3 favorite episodes.
I love a good near-death experience with a spiritual aspect to it. I read one about a kid who died in a hospital, and he flew over his body and could see his parents and stuff. And he came back, like it was like 10 minutes or something, not something too long. But when he came back, he told them everything that was happening in the waiting room, and they were like, "How did you know this?" And this dude I read online, it says he's like in his 20s or something now. He's like, knows all this stuff and said the same thing. Like, yo, there's a different experience out there. There are definitely extraterrestrial beings. So I have to listen to these episodes. This sounds like everything that I watch on TV, but it'll just be podcasts, which I
just
love.
Podcasts.
Yes, it's awesome. Okay, so I have to ask a question about succubi and succubus.
Incubi and succubi.
Okay, tell me the difference.
Now, I always get them confused. Incubi is the male that has sex with females, and succubi is the female that has sex with males. So these are spirits or entities. Some are earth spirit, humans that have not moved on, who were rapists or really nasty people in life like that, and they were predatory in life, and they just continue that in death. So very often there's a school of thought that says the incubi and succubi are the same creature, and they just simply change form. So they change into a female if they're going to assault a male, into a male if they're going to assault a female. Very often these encounters are non-consensual, they're rape. And the victims are totally traumatized. It's the same as a regular rape victim, except it's a little bit, and it's different, because with a rape victim of a physical person, they can say, well, this person touched me or tried to fight them off and whatever. But for a victim of an incubus or a succubus, they don't have a physical thing, and it's enough to go through the experience of being raped without saying, well, look, I was raped by a ghost. Who's going to believe them?
Yeah. Why are succubi portrayed on TV as like these cool things then? Because I feel like when you watch, do you watch like any of these paranormal shows?
Yeah. They do. They portray them. Well, and in some cases, it is consensual. In some cases, there are people who deliberately go out and seek these experiences with incubi and succubi because they, for whatever reason, prefer that to a human experience.
See, I don't know what show I'm thinking about, but I think it's one of them vampires. I don't know, but the succubus it was a girl, and she kept a man like under lock and key, like almost like that was her. He couldn't leave her. Vampire Diaries. Okay, maybe that wasn't a succubus. Maybe that was a siren. What's a siren?
I don't know.
Okay, cool. That's what I'm like. I think was that
Yeah,
bad?
yeah,
I think she was a
yeah.
succubus, but they were under some kind of like contract and they had to like break it or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Sometimes people do make contracts with them, agreements with them, but that's rare. Mostly, it's non-consensual, and sometimes with consensual one. In fact, there was one that was in Britain that was televised all over Britain a few years ago. It was this woman who married this pirate. He presented as a pirate to her, and she married him. It was all over the TV, in New Zealand and in Britain, and she was interviewed all over the TV, and she was so in love with this pirate, and she was going to marry him, and they had sex, and they had, it was really enjoyable, blah blah blah. Then about a year later, maybe, she came back and she was really ill. Her health was declining. Now, see, the thing is that with the human ones, that's fine. But many of these entities that do this are actually energy vampires, and what they're doing is they're draining your energy. They feed off the energy that you give them, willingly or non-willingly.
Yeah.
And so this woman's health was suffering as a result. She was very physically ill, and she realized ultimately that every time he came and they had sex, she'd get sick again. So she realized that this was not a good relationship, and she had him exorcised.
And did it work?
Well, I guess so. I haven't heard anything more about it.
God, oh no! I gotta look the story up now.
It's all over. It's all. Well, there's a link to it in my incubator on my website, walkingtheshadowlands.com. I have full written transcripts of every episode, and so there's in the incubus and succubus episode there is a link to her story there.
Yeah. Whew, that's good stuff. Okay, so last question here. How are you not afraid with all this stuff that's going on that you just tap into naturally? Like, how are you not afraid? Because most people are like, oh my God, a ghost, and they get afraid. So
yeah,
like, what is it like for you?
Well, if somebody was suddenly to appear in front of me, I'd get afraid. And it would scare me initially, because that's the normal human fight or flight response. That's just a thing you can't control. Everybody does that, so you get a start. But immediately after that, I'm fine. The only thing that scares me in all of this is spontaneous human combustion. That's the only thing that I can honestly say scares me, because they don't know what causes it. It's a very real phenomenon, and it could hit anybody.
So, okay. So there are just cases of people just combusting.
Yep, absolutely.
Why am I not hearing this? I haven't seen that on my timeline or anything.
Yeah, it's rare, but it happens. It absolutely happens, yeah.
I'm gonna look.
And it's a recorded medical phenomenon. There are a lot of theories around why it might happen, but they don't really know for sure.
So it's just like combustion, like completely, like every atom in your body is just gone. You just disappear, like vanish.
You burst into flames from the inside out.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, combustion.
Yeah,
you did say that. I was like, damn, that's science. Like, you would just burst into flames.
Yeah, and usually, apparently, it's a blue flame. There is a case in the episode I did, which is just called Spontaneous Human Combustion, where this chap burst into fire. His hand caught fire, blue flames, and he wasn't even aware of it. He didn't feel it. He was fishing with a friend. It was his friend who saw it and put it out.
Did they put it out? Oh, so if you don't put it out, you can burn up. You think it's because the sun is so hot? Possibly. No, not that.
No. Because everybody would be bursting into flames, or little vampires.
What about like the phoenix? Because the phoenix burns itself up.
Yeah, but it rises from the ashes.
Oh, dang. I guess those people don't. Dang. That's crazy. Yeah. Is that a phoenix the real thing? Like, is that a just...
I don't actually, I've never looked into that one. There's one to look into. Thank you for that.
I watch a lot of Harry Potter, so most of
Oh,
what
yeah.
you're saying, I'm just imagining these things because that's all my imagination has got. So
Harry Potter. Good,
yeah.
good series. And I like
Oh,
that.
I love Harry Potter. Oh, we did
Yeah.
a Thanksgiving marathon where we watched every movie back to back to back. Oh God. It was
Oh,
just,
that's great. That sounds like something my son would do.
yeah, it was just so good. And that was when I was growing up, Harry Potter. So that was
Yeah,
my
you're
stuff.
about the same age as my son, I would say. Yeah, he has all the first editions of the Harry Potter books as they came out.
I should have kept them. I think I wrote in all of them. Like I have them. They're probably still at my mom's house. But when I was a kid, I would just take my pen and be like, "This is so awesome." I was just like annotating like regular books, which is weird. And now my handwriting is like huge. You look back and you're like, man, I really couldn't write. Oh man. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Marianne. I've had such a good time talking to you. And please remind the folks who are listening and not watching us where they can find you on the internet.
Oh, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed my conversation. I'm on Instagram at Walking the Shadowlands, Twitter at Shadowlands10. I have my website, www.walkingtheshadowlands.com. I'm also on TikTok, which my kids get a real kick out of because I've only been on there for a few weeks. I'm a bit slow to that party, but that's at Walking the Shadowlands. Sorry, my cat's just decided
It's
to
all
join
good.
us.
It's all good.
Whoops, sorry.
No, you're all good. You're all good. I have a dog that will walk through at some point in the show. So
He's been good today.
yeah.
So yes, I'm on Twitter, Facebook. My Facebook page is just Walking the Shadowlands. Oh, WT Shadowlands. My website, my Facebook group is Walking the Shadowlands, and I'm on any free podcasting platform, including Amazon,
Amazon
everywhere
Music
really.
too. All right.
Yeah.
Well, for those of you who are watching, all of this information will be in the description of this episode. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you so much for listening to What the Pod. You, and you. Please hit the like, subscribe, the bell, whatever, the follow, whatever platform that you're listening on. Make sure you don't miss an episode. As you can see, we've got pretty cool people coming on, and you don't want to miss a show. I will see you next week. My name is DJ Tricey Trice, and you have listened to What the Pod.